So looking back at the DCEU, I realized there's some great casting here. You got Zachary Levi, you got Gal Gadot, you got Margot Robbie, you got Jason Momoa, and I was just about ready to start praising the casting in the DCEU. And then I remembered that they decided to have Robert Pattinson be Batman. Whatever. So after watching and reviewing Birds of Prey, I decided to go back and rank all 9 DCEU movies. That's right, 9. I'm including the Joker because even though it's not technically in the DCEU, it's a DC Comics Warner Brothers property that came out post Man of Steel. And there are a lot of rumors that the Joker will actually link to the DCEU, and frankly, given the movie's success, it wouldn't surprise me if Warner Brothers decided to do that. But without further ado, let's get into number 9. Number 9 on my list is Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad was DCEU's response to the Guardians of the Galaxy from the MCU. And while the Guardians knocked it out of the park, Suicide Squad was pretty much an epic fail. Right from the get-go, the character introductions were incredibly lazy. It's just a dinner conversation with little clips of each character, and it's so boring. And then you have the story itself, which is really forgettable. The villain is just this evil for the sake of being evil villain that creates this big sky beam with all this floating garbage. And if this movie wasn't being lazy, it was being over-the-top desperate. For example, in Guardians of the Galaxy, a lot of people really liked their killer soundtrack. So in Suicide Squad, they tossed together a huge soundtrack of, don't get me wrong, really good music, but it was just really overstuffed with it. And they did the same thing with the Joker. Look, I think Jared Leto has the potential to be a great Joker. But this movie just goes way too far with all the Jokerisms. From his over-the-top dialogue to his stupid smiling hand tattoo, it was just too much. And this movie has many other areas that were just way too desperate. And they were trying to capitalize on things like the soundtrack or the Joker, but they just take it way too far to the point where it becomes really off-putting. I really don't have many nice things to say about this movie. There was some solid acting in the movie. Will Smith's pretty great. Margot Robbie was wonderful. And even Jai Courtney was good. He actually played a character with a personality, so I guess that's good. But all in all, this movie easily makes it to the bottom of my list. Number 8 on my list is Justice League. Now, I've been wanting a Justice League movie for a long time, and honestly, I would have waited a little longer if it meant getting a movie better than the end result. This movie was just really rushed, and it shows. Once again, I'm going to compare the DCEU to the MCU. Look, the MCU just simply did a better job of building their characters before making a big collaboration movie. 4 of the 6 Avengers had their own standalone movies, and the other 2 Avengers had their own roles in previous movies. Like Black Widow was in Iron Man 2, and Hawkeye was in Thor. In the DCEU, 3 of the 6 heroes had their own standalone movies, and the remaining 3 were just briefly mentioned in an email. On top of that, there was some subtle build-up to the adventures sprinkled throughout all the previous MCU movies. The only build-up Justice League really has was Bruce Wayne having a feeling. Now, I'm not saying Justice League had to do everything like the Avengers. I'm just pointing out where the Avengers really, flourished and where Justice League just simply flopped. On top of that, having both Snyder and Whedon direct makes this movie feel really tonally inconsistent. I don't think that Steppenwolf worked as a villain all that well either. And like Suicide Squad, the only real positive takeaway I have of this movie is the actors' performances. And there's some solid superhero action as well in this movie. What places this above Suicide Squad for me is it's far more rewatchable. Even though it has its fair share of problems, it's still fun to watch all the DC heroes throwing down. Number 7 on my list is Shazam. Now, I really thought Shazam was going to pull the DCU out of their usual somber and serious formula and give us something a little bit more lighthearted and different. But overall, what we got was pretty My biggest problem with this movie is how tonally inconsistent it is. There are times when it's really funny. Look, 15 jokes a minute, lighthearted, and then it just goes off the rails dark. Happened multiple times in this movie, and it's just really abrupt every time. Also, the movie drags in the middle, and every time I watch it, I get a little bored. Also, I didn't find the villain all that interesting. He was pretty one note. With all that said, there's some things to enjoy in this movie. There's some good humor. Reminds me a lot of the Tom Hanks movie Big. Zachary Levi does a great job in the lead role, and the final action sequence is a blast. What puts this above Justice League is just the fact that it's a far better made movie. Justice League, like I said, it feels very rushed, has a lot of story problems, and it's just all around a real messy movie. Shazam is far more cohesive, and frankly, much less of a chore to watch. Number 6 on my list is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Now, BVS has its fair share of problems. The worst of these is the story. Even in the Ultimate Edition, the story still doesn't make that much sense. It doesn't take too much digging to find some plot holes. On top of that, the movie was trying to juggle way too many things at once. This movie is a Man of Steel 2 movie, it's a Batman movie, an origin story for the Justice League, just all rolled into one. It's extremely messy. It forces the movie to cut a lot of corners. The conflict that leads up to the big Batman and Superman throwdown is really forced. We have to be introduced to the Justice League via security camera footage that was sent to Wonder Woman through an email? And there's no real reason to have Doomsday other than so that you can just kill Superman. This movie isn't as messy as Justice League, but it's still all over the place. So what makes this take my number 6 spot above Shazam? Well, the movie is just stupid fun. I mean, it's a guilty pleasure movie for me. It has Batman beating up an entire warehouse of henchmen. It has Batman and Superman fighting. It has a team up of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman fighting Doomsday. Batman even has his own Rocky Balboa-like training montage. I mean, this is my go-to DCEU movie when I just want to turn off my brain and watch stuff blow up. Number 5 on my list is Aquaman. Now, for years, Aquaman has been the butt of a lot of jokes. He's not exactly the coolest hero or one that you can take all that serious. So I think the treatment of Aquaman in this movie is spot on. They went with Jason Momoa, an actor that just radiates cool, to try to bring some dignity back to the character of Aquaman. But at the same time, they don't take Aquaman all that serious. And that's really what makes this movie great. It's fun, bright, colorful, full of unique underwater action. And the action is shot very video game-like, which is off-putting for some, but I actually think that it fits well with the tone of this movie. The only problem I really have with Aquaman is how safe they played the story. Now, a lot of people will critique a movie if the story feels kind of familiar, and we've seen it a lot in other movies. And to be honest, I think that's kind of a dumb argument. Like, okay, it's familiar, but what really matters is how it's executed. With that said, this movie takes like half a dozen story elements that feel familiar, like the idea of a hero being part human and part fantasy sci-fi character, and they have to deal with all the prejudice involved. We've seen it with Spock and a few other dozen characters, or the story of the hero going on a hunt to retrieve a powerful mythical weapon, or having to fight for the throne so it doesn't fall in the hands of a terrible leader. We've all seen it 1,000 times, and they've all been executed better in the past. But what makes this movie above Batman vs. Superman is it's just far better made. It's far less of a mess. Like I said, BVS is pretty much a guilty pleasure movie for me, and Aquaman is much more than that. So number 4 and number 3 on my list are really close, but ultimately I went with Birds of Prey for number 4. I reviewed Birds of Prey, and I'll put a link up there. And I really liked it. It's a fun, charming movie with great characters like Harley Quinn, Black Mask, and Huntress. Margot Robbie does a phenomenal job as Harley Quinn. She brings so much to the role, and I look forward to seeing her in future installments. On top of that, the movie had fun, over-the-top, incredibly well-shot action. The first act of this movie was a little rough, and sometimes the movie went a little style over substance, but all in all, Birds of Prey is a fun time. I put it above Aquaman because action-wise, they both excite the audience equally, in my opinion. But Birds of Prey has a far more interesting story. Number 3 on my list is Man of Steel. That's right, the first DCEU movie. Man of Steel is an awesome movie that, in my opinion, doesn't get enough credit for how well it explores the hero of Superman. For years, Superman was just treated very basic in movies, with, frankly, just cheesy people standing on street corners going, "It's a bird, it's a plane, no, it's Superman, hooray!" This movie explores who Superman is and what the potential consequences are if a character like Superman were to exist in our world. And rumor has it that's the whole reason that Christopher Nolan wanted to work on this project in the first place. This movie also does a great job of exploring the 3 sides of Superman. You've got the Superman side, the Clark Kent side, and the Kal-El side. All of them come together in the end to create the Man of Steel we all know and love. My only issue with this movie is the final action throwdown. Visually, it's awesome, but tonally, it's just stupid crazy off from the rest of the movie. Most of the movie keeps things very close to the ground, but the end action sequence just goes nuts. Like I said, it's pretty close to Birds of Prey. The only reason I put this above Birds of Prey is because I think Man of Steel is just a little bit more rewatchable for me. Number 2 on my list is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is a great movie. Gal Gadot is perfectly cast as Wonder Woman. She's tough, handles the action scenes well, and works great with all the goofy fish out of water humor. And her and Chris Pine also have great chemistry. They just really work off each other very well. Chris Pine basically plays Chris Pine, the brave, heroic, good guy with a solid sense of humor. And that really works for this movie. This movie also introduces us to the Amazons, and I think they did a great job of making them awesome warriors without being too cheesy. And the island of Themyscira, or however you pronounce it, is, in my opinion, the coolest fictional place we've seen in the DCEU, even more so than Krypton or Atlantis. And the action is also really amazing in this movie, especially the scene where she storms the German camp. It really showcases how powerful Wonder Woman is, and it's very gritty but yet very stylized. Honestly, the only real negatives I have with this movie is sometimes the pacing is a bit slow, and I think they could have done a little better job of balancing the villains. But still a great movie, definitely better than Man of Steel because it doesn't suffer from the big tonal inconsistencies that Man of Steel suffers from. But number 1 on my list has to go to The Dark Knight. Now, it's been well established that the only reason Christopher Nolan worked on Man of Steel was because The Dark Knight tied directly into the DCEU, and he wanted to oversee the production of the movie that was going to make The Dark Knight and the DCEU come together full circle. I'm just messing with you. Number 1 on my list is The Joker. The Joker is a fantastic movie that explores the psyche of the Joker in a very realistic way. While we're used to seeing the Joker running around Gotham unhinged, this movie is really the story of how he became unhinged. And again, it does it in a very realistic way. Joaquin Phoenix is fantastic as the Joker. There are times in the movie where you feel really sorry for Arthur, and there are other times when you feel absolutely terrified of him. And Joaquin Phoenix owns every bit of his role perfectly. I have no complaints with the Joker. It is an incredibly well-made movie. It's well directed, written, shot, acted. Just everything about this movie works. Now again, it's not technically in the DCEU, and frankly, I hope they don't incorporate it into the DCEU, but I'm all for a sequel, but I really want it to stay independent. However, like I said, there are some rumors and some fan theories that they may try to incorporate into the DCEU, so I figured, what the heck. It's going on my list and it easily takes that number 1 spot. But what's your ranking of the movies in the DCEU? Comment down below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to keep yourself updated on future content.